It was 8:20 in the morning. The twins were loitering over their cereal, and Mrs. Walpole, with one eye on the clock and the other on the kitchen window, past which the school bus would come in a matter of minutes, felt the unreasonable irritation that comes with being late on a school morning, the wading through molasses feeling of trying to hurry children. "You'll have to walk," she said ominously, for perhaps the third time. "The bus won't wait." "I'm hurrying," Judy said. She regarded her full glass of milk smugly. "I'm closer to through than Jack." Jack pushed his glass across the table, and they measured meticulously, precisely. "No," he said. "Look how much more you have than me." "It doesn't matter," Mrs. Walpole said. "Jack, eat your cereal." "She didn't have any more than me to start with," Jack said. "Did she have any more than me, Mom?" The alarm clock had not gone off at 7 as it should. Mrs. Walpole heard the sound of the shower upstairs and calculated rapidly. The coffee was slower than usual this morning, the boiled eggs a shade too soft. She had only had time to pour herself a glass of fruit juice and no time to drink it. Someone, Judy or Jack or Mr. Walpole, was going to be late. "Judy," Mrs. Walpole said mechanically. "Jack." Judy's hair was not accurately braided. Jack would get off without his handkerchief. Mr. Walpole would certainly be irritable. The yellow and red bulk of the school bus filled the road outside the kitchen window, and Judy and Jack streaked for the door, cereal uneaten, books most likely forgotten. Mrs. Walpole followed them to the kitchen door, calling, "Jack, your milk money. Come straight home at noon." She watched them climb into the school bus and then went briskly to work, clearing their dishes from the table and setting a place for Mr. Walpole. She would have to have breakfast herself later, in the breathing spell that came after 9 o'clock. That meant her wash would be late getting on the line, and if it rained that afternoon, as it certainly might, nothing would be dry. Mrs. Walpole made an effort and said, "Good morning, dear," as her husband came into the kitchen. He said, "Morning," without glancing up, and Mrs. Walpole, her mind full of unfinished sentences that began, "Don't you think other people ever have any feelings or," started patiently to set his breakfast before him. The soft-boiled eggs in their dish, the toast, the coffee. Mr. Walpole devoted himself to his paper, and Mrs. Walpole, who wanted desperately also to say, "I don't suppose you noticed that I haven't had a chance to eat," set the dishes down as softly as she could. Everything was going smoothly, although half an hour late when the telephone rang. The Walpoles were on a party line, and Mrs. Walpole usually let the phone ring her number twice before concluding that it was really their number. This morning, before 9 o'clock, with Mr. Walpole not half through his breakfast, it was an unbearable intrusion, and Mrs. Walpole went reluctantly to answer it. "Hello," she said forbiddingly. "Mrs. Walpole," the voice said, and Mrs. Walpole said, "Yes." The voice, it was a woman, said, "I'm sorry to bother you, but this is," and gave an unrecognizable name. Mrs. Walpole said, "Yes," again. She could hear Mr. Walpole taking the coffee pot off the stove to pour himself a second cup. "Do you have a dog? Brown and black hound?" the voice continued. With the word dog, Mrs. Walpole, in the second before she answered, "Yes," comprehended the innumerable aspects of owning a dog in the country. $6 for spaying, the rude barking late at night, the watchful security of the dark shape sleeping on the rug beside the double-decker beds in the twins' room, the inevitability of a dog in the house, as important as a stove or a front porch, or a subscription to the local paper. More, and above any of these things, the dog herself, known among the neighbors as Lady Walpole, on an exact par with Jack Walpole or Judy Walpole, quiet, competent, exceedingly tolerant, and found in none of them a reason for such an early morning call from a voice which she realized now was as irritable as her own. "Yes," Mrs. Walpole said shortly, "I own a dog. Why?" Big brown and black hound? Lady's pretty markings. Her odd face. "Yes," Mrs. Walpole said, her voice a little more impatient. Yes, that is certainly my dog. Why? He's been killing my chickens. The voice sounded satisfied now. Mrs. Walpole had been cornered. For several seconds, Mrs. Walpole was quiet, so that the voice said, "Hello?" "That's perfectly ridiculous," Mrs. Walpole said. "This morning," the voice said with relish, "your dog was chasing our chickens. We heard the chickens at about 8 o'clock, and my husband went out to see what was the matter and found 2 chickens dead, and he saw a big brown and black hound down with the chickens, and he took a stick and chased the dog away, and then he found 2 more dead ones. He says," the voice went on flatly, "that it's lucky he didn't think to take his shotgun out with him because you wouldn't have any more dog. Most awful mess you ever saw," the voice said. "Blood and feathers everywhere." "What makes you think it's my dog?" Mrs. Walpole said weakly. "Joe White, he's a neighbor of yours, was passing at the time and saw my husband chasing the dog. Said it was your dog." Old Man White lived in the next house, but one to the Walpoles. Mrs. Walpole had always made a point of being courteous to him, inquired amiably about his health when she saw him on the porch as she passed, had regarded respectfully the pictures of his grandchildren in Albany. "I see," Mrs. Walpole said, suddenly shifting her ground. "Well, if you're absolutely sure. I just can't believe it of Lady. She's so gentle." The other voice softened in response to Mrs. Walpole's concern. "It is a shame," the other woman said. "I can't tell you how sorry I am that it happened, but—" Her voice trailed off significantly. "Of course we'll take care of the damage," Mrs. Walpole said quickly. No, the woman said, almost apologetically. "Don't even think about it." "But of course," Mrs. Walpole began, bewildered. "The dog," the voice said. "You'll have to do something about the dog." A sudden, unalterable terror took hold of Mrs. Walpole. Her morning had gone badly. She had not yet had her coffee. She was faced with an evil situation she had never known before. And now, the voice, its tone, its inflection, had managed to frighten Mrs. Walpole with a word like, something. "How?" Mrs. Walpole said finally. "I mean, what do you want me to do?" There was a brief silence on the other end of the wire, and then the voice said briskly, "I'm sure I don't know, Mrs. I've always heard that there's no way to stop a chicken-killing dog. As I say, there was no damage to speak of. As a matter of fact, the chickens the dog killed are plucked and in the oven now." Mrs. Walpole's throat tightened, and she closed her eyes for a minute, but the voice went inflexibly on. "We wouldn't ask you to do anything except take care of the dog. Naturally, you understand that we can't have a dog killing our chickens?" Realizing that she was expected to answer, Mrs. Walpole said, "Certainly." "So," the voice said. Mrs. Walpole saw over the top of the phone that Mr. Walpole was passing her on his way to the door. He waved briefly to her, and she nodded at him. He was late. She had intended to ask him to stop at the library in the city. Now she would have to call him later. Mrs. Walpole said sharply into the phone, "First of all, of course, I'll have to make sure it's my dog. If it is my dog, I can promise you'll have no more trouble." "It's your dog, all right." The voice had assumed the country flatness. If Mrs. Walpole wanted to fight, the voice implied, she had picked just the right people. "Goodbye," Mrs. Walpole said, knowing that she was making a mistake in parting from this woman angrily, knowing that she should stay on the phone for an interminable apologetic conversation, try to beg her dog's life back from this stupid, inflexible woman who cared so much for her stupid chickens. Mrs. Walpole put the phone down and went out into the kitchen. She poured herself a cup of coffee and made herself some toast. "I am not going to let this bother me until after I have had my coffee," Mrs. Walpole told herself firmly. She put extra butter on her toast and tried to relax, moving her back against the chair, letting her shoulders sag. Feeling like this at 9:30 in the morning, she thought, it's a feeling that belongs with 11 o'clock at night. The bright sun outside was not as cheerful as it might be. Mrs. Walpole decided suddenly to put her wash off until tomorrow. They had not lived in the country town long enough for Mrs. Walpole to feel the disgrace of washing on Tuesday as mortal. They were still city folk and would probably always be city folk. People who owned a chicken-killing dog, people who washed on Tuesday, people who were not able to fend for themselves against the limited world of earth and food and weather that the country folk took so much for granted. In this situation, as in all such others, the disposal of rubbish, the weather stripping, the baking of angel food cake, Mrs. Walpole was forced to look for advice. In the country, it is extremely difficult to get a man to do things for you, and Mr. and Mrs. Walpole had early fallen into the habit of consulting their neighbors for information which in the city would have belonged properly to the superintendent, or the janitor, or the man from the gas company. When Mrs. Walpole's glance fell on Lady's water dish under the sink, and she realized that she was indescribably depressed, she got up and put on her jacket and a scarf over her head and went next door. Mrs. Nash, her next-door neighbor, was frying donuts, and she waved a fork at Mrs. Walpole at the open door and called, "Come in, can't leave the stove." Mrs. Walpole, stepping into Mrs. Nash's kitchen, was painfully aware of her own kitchen with the dirty dishes in the sink. Mrs. Nash was wearing a shockingly clean house dress, and her kitchen was freshly washed. Mrs. Nash was able to fry donuts without making any sort of a mess. "The men do like fresh donuts with their lunch," Mrs. Nash remarked, without any more preamble than her nod and invitation to Mrs. Walpole. "I always try to get enough made ahead, but I never do." "I wish I could make donuts," Mrs. Walpole said. Mrs. Nash waved the fork hospitably at the stack of still warm donuts on the table, and Mrs. Walpole helped herself to one, thinking, "This will give me indigestion." "Seems like they all get eaten by the time I finish making them," Mrs. Nash said. She surveyed the cooking donuts and then, satisfied that she could look away for a minute, took one herself and began to eat it standing by the stove. "What's wrong with you?" she asked. "You look sort of peaked this morning." "To tell you the truth," Mrs. Walpole said, "it's our dog. Someone called me this morning that she's been killing chickens." Mrs. Nash nodded. "Up to Harris," she said. "I know." Of course she'd know by now, Mrs. Walpole thought. "You know," Mrs. Nash said, turning again to the donuts, "they do say there's nothing to do with a dog kills chickens. My brother had a dog once killed sheep, and I don't know what they didn't do to break that dog. But, of course, nothing would do it. Once they get the taste of blood." Mrs. Nash lifted a golden donut delicately out of the frying kettle and set it down on a piece of brown paper to drain. "They get so's they'd rather kill than eat hardly." "But what can I do?" Mrs. Walpole asked. "Isn't there anything?" "You can try, of course," Mrs. Nash said. "Best thing to do first is tie her up. Keep her tied with a good stout chain. Then at least she won't go chasing no more chickens for a while. Save you getting her killed for you." Mrs. Walpole got up reluctantly and began to put her scarf on again. "I guess I'd better get a chain down at the store," she said. "You going down street?" "I want to do my shopping before the kids come home for lunch." "Don't buy any store donuts," Mrs. Nash said. "I'll run up later with a dishful for you. You get a good stout chain for that dog." "Thank you," Mrs. Walpole said. The bright sunlight across Mrs. Nash's kitchen doorway, the solid table bearing its plates of donuts, the pleasant smell of the frying, were all symbols somehow of Mrs. Nash's safety, her confidence in a way of life and a security that had no traffic with chicken killing, no city fears, an assurance and cleanliness so great that she was willing to bestow its overflow on the Walpoles, bring them donuts, and overlook Mrs. Walpole's dirty kitchen.